Okay, I'm ready to rock and roll when we start.
Okay, so it's just 1 minute. I'll start the webinar right away.
No worries. I'm just curious, Anirudh, I don't see all these other participants coming up and to be let in. Is it because it's a webinar?
Yes, it's a webinar and it hasn't started yet. So once I'll start the webinar, all the participants will be there.
Okay. All right, cool.
Okay.
Thanks.
It was just a practice session for having all the checks done.
Right.
Now I'll start the webinar.
All right.
That up to you, sir. All the best.
Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome. I hope you're all having a nice Saturday afternoon. You're bringing lots of energy with you. Good afternoon, Suchi. Hello, Nakul. Hello. Great to see you all here. Let's just give them a moment for everyone to kind of log in and get with us. And then we're going to kick off, I should say. Karan, hello to you. Good afternoon. I'm really excited to be back with you all. As a reminder, my name's AJ again. Yes, and I'm based in Singapore. So if you can see, my virtual background has the shop houses here in iconic Singapore. So I'm very happy to be here with you all today. Today, we're going to go through design thinking. I'm really excited. There's so much to cover, guys. I'm going to try to do my best to get you through it and get you to really understand it. And hopefully you really start to love the whole user-centered design process. So let me share my screen and we can kick off. So again, today it's user-centered design, and design thinking is really the base methodology for this. So what are we going to really cover today? We're going to be covering the 5 steps of the design thinking process. I'll take you through that. We're going to look at some examples of products, services, solutions that were developed through design thinking from a few different industries. So you get a feel, say, oh, okay, I see how the design thinking has real use cases and products that have been launched. And we're going to also look at, how to effectively brainstorm and create concepts. So the brainstorming methodology I'll refer to is really affinity mapping. So that should be something that you can, get familiar with. To let you know what some of the next modules will cover is really conceptualizing your concept, kind of putting a little bit more meat on the bone. So at this stage, we don't have enough time to focus on that. We'll take you through the process, but other modules will focus on really putting more meat on the bones and conceptualizing your concept. You'll also spend a lot of time focusing on usability testing. It's so important to do that right. There's so many skills, and you guys will have a ton of questions on user testing, and future modules are focused on that. And also how to really build an MVP. What does success look like? How do we set ourselves up for success? Yeah. So quick test first of all, and I want you guys to interact with me on this. What is this framework called? I'd like you to use the chat, and please put into the chat, if you can recall, what is this framework? It's an innovation it's an innovation management framework. What is this called? If you can recall from their last session. Yes, it's a funnel. Absolutely, it is a funnel. But we call this, there's certain kind of gates that we have here. Maturity, close. It's not really about product maturity. Stage gate, Eddie. All right, thank you very much. So stage gate or phase gate. This is what this is called. And what we do is we move from the left where we have some ideas and coming into our funnel. And what we need to do is our ideas need to survive. It's either you sink or swim. So if you sink, that means you don't pass to the next gate. So all of these different gates are symbolic. We should have people that will say, well, are we passing this first gate? Yes, we are. Then we go to the next one. And that's the funneling process. So we might have 1,000 ideas coming in and we'll have 2 or 3 coming out. That's, these gates are there to ensure certain criteria are being met. So let's think the first phase, or the first kind of stages of phase gate or stage gate. What is this called? A. And then I want to find out what B is. So A is about desirability. Absolutely. Very good, Sakshi. So we want to validate the desirability. The second thing we want to validate is if we believe there are customers, they have a pain point, a problem, we believe we should be the ones to solve it. That's passing stage A. Right, now we validated that. Then we need to go to stage B. What is stage B trying to validate? Very good. So feasibility. We want to say, well, okay, how do we solve the problem? What is the solution? How does this come together? And finally, if we say, okay, we know what the problem is, we have several potential solutions, we then need to assess C. And what is C? Viability. Sakshi, you should get an A+ today. You're giving us all the answers. Thank you very much. So viability is really financial viability. It's how much money are we going to make? It's going to be our net present value. It's going to be our ROI, all of our financial metrics. And now what we want to do is we want to make sure that we assess that, but we don't want to start with ROI factors too early. We want to really understand, are there customers and is there a problem worth solving? So for homework, so thank you very much, everyone. This is just a reminder about the overall methodology of how do we manage innovation from the beginning all the way through to a product that we can launch. And phase gate and stage gate is that core methodology. Now, as a pre-assignment, I had asked you guys all to watch a little video about design thinking. It was a basic kind of overview of what the process was like. And if you can recall, for those of you who did watch it, that originally the persona, the target users were the elderly. And in the beginning, the people that were doing this research, they were thinking mobility was an issue. They're old. How do old people get around? It's difficult in life. What are the problems that they have? It's about mobility. But when they started digging in and trying to really understand the elderly, they realized that actually mobility was just a means to an end. Yes, they want mobility, but they wanted to have mobility to feel connected. They want to be able to connect with people. So actually, when the user said, yeah, mobility, 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 when we kind of dig down into it, we realize that that's just a symptomatic issue. The root problem that they're trying to solve is, I don't want to be lonely. I want to be connected with other people. And mobility is one of the obstacles we believe that prevent us from having that connectivity. But by knowing that, then we can really understand what's the root problem, and then we can innovate in the right way. And some of our ideas to connect elderly and make them not feel lonely may not have anything to do with mobility. And that's fine. It might still address their core problem statement. So this is an example from this design thinking video that I asked you to watch. Now, a little bit about the background. This is our man, David Kelly. He's from Stanford. He has been around for a long time, from the 70s. He really brought together several concepts that were pulled together in a process, which we now call design thinking. So a lot of these kind of ideas existed. He just pulled it together in a more formal manner. He was a professor at Stanford D School. So Stanford is like the birthplace of design thinking. And mass adoption really started coming in around the year 2000, 2001, 2002. So the early part of this millennia. And it really started appealing to a lot of different industries where user-centered design was an untapped opportunity. It's really used for product, process, and service innovation, where users are at the heart of the process. So if we want to use it for experiences as well, it is a fantastic tool. So what's this methodology? Well, there's 5 key steps. The empathy stage, and we're going to go into all of these in detail, but the empathy stage starts off with, who are our customers? What problems do they have? What pain points do they have? What's their life like today? Then from there, we say, well, if we understand their life and their journeys, what they're going through, can we identify problems to solve in their life or in their journeys? And we'll have a lot of different problems that will come up, but then we have to narrow down to a core, clear problem statement. And that then serves as the basis for the next stage, which is ideation. This is where we start coming up with a lot of ideas, and we start, trying to put together and build ideas to concepts to prototypes. And then from prototypes, then we go into testing. Now, what's really I don't like about this visual is, yes, there's 5 steps to the design thinking process. And this really shows, we move from left to right, But one thing to know about design thinking is that it's very, very iterative, which requires an agile approach. So on a high level, what does this really mean? Is, first of all, we start seeing something. We think that there's a problem for a particular user. We observe them. We might try to understand and say, well, let's see what's going on to understand the problem. Then what we do is we try to think of solutions to solve that problem. And we build together some rough concepts. And then what we need to do is we need to build prototypes. And the only purpose of a prototype is to put it in front of the users to say, all right, this is what we think is the solution for your problem. Why don't you kind of interact with our prototype? Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, and we'll learn. And then so we put it in front of them, we test it, we measure, we try to get some real hard data back. We see what they like, what they don't like, and then we get a lot of learnings. So we learn that, usually from your first prototype, it should be really so basic, like using crayon and this paper, just something really basic, and just test the basic idea first. And then it should be literally 5% right, 10% right, and 90% wrong. And that's okay. Just validate. If it's going to be 10% right, you better be bloody sure that 10% is really, really correct, right? So then we build up some confidence, but it's only 10% confidence. Then we get some feedback. We find out, well, what's the next 10%? How can we make this better? And so this is very kind of iterative, the process of going from concepts to building prototypes to testing and measuring to learning. And we have to go kind of in circles here. So while it looks like it's just, well, let's just do the prototype and that's one step. We do that, it's finished. Let's go into testing. That's completely false. It's actually, we're kind of prototyping, testing, we're going back, we're ideating, we're improving our concept, we're going back, we're having a new prototype or version 2, we're testing it. And so it's very, very iterative between these stages. Now we move from left to right, that's correct, but there's a lot of looping back and forth, and that really requires agile mindset. So a couple of examples quickly. We have Heinz tomato ketchup. So if we look at Heinz, we had the bottle, which was around for a long time. Then Heinz came up with this new bottle. Why? And I want you to use the chat, everyone. What was the problem that you think users were experiencing while using this glass bottle on the left? What do you think were some of the problems that users would experience using it? Okay, it could break. Not convenient with kids. Why, Shuba? Why not convenient with kids? Flow of the sauce, right? Yeah, it's either it doesn't come out, or when it does come out, it comes out like a volcano. It's way too difficult, right? How do you get the right amount? It's very, very difficult. What about, cleaning it? Reusage could have been an issue as well. But also, it's the bottom 20%. How do we get that bottom bit out? When it's a new bottle, it's kind of easy. But when it's the bottom bit, it was very difficult for users to kind of get access. So they said, hey, what's the problem? Is the ketchup the problem? No, everyone loves the ketchup. Customers said, don't touch the recipe. That's great. What's the problem is just using your product. It's interacting with it sucks. I can't get it out. I get too much. I have to bang the bottle. I have to flip it upside down. So that's what the problem that they needed to solve. And they came out with this product over here, which was a packaging innovation. And so that is, this came about through applying design thinking. What is this device that I'm showing you in the middle of the screen? I'm looking up at the chat. Please let me know what is this picture in the middle of our screen? It's an MRI machine, Karan. Very good. It's an MRI machine. Yes, Priti? So an MRI machine. An MRI machine is loud. It scans. It's a medical device at a hospital. It's large with a dedicated room. And you need to lay down on this tray. You have to be very, very still. They'll put you into this machine, which is very dark and noisy and confined. And you have to be very still so the machine can take an image of the soft tissue in your body. Now, that's the concept. But for adults, maybe they can accept it. But for children, it was terrifying. They hated this idea of this loud machine. They had to be very still. Kids can't be still. It's like almost impossible. And so what was the problem? The MRI machines, if it's used correctly, has great images. They can't change that technology. They need to find a way to make the user overcome their fear. So the problem was, how do we overcome fear of children so that they will be still inside this machine? And what they did in one concept here is they tried to make a storyline out of it. They tell the children, hey, we're going to go into this new room. It's an underwater universe. You're going to have your own submarine. It's just you in the submarine, and you're going to be going underwater. So a submarine, it's going to be cold. It's going to be confined. You're going to be going into some caves underwater on your exploration. And they built up a kind of a story so the children could then be excited and overcome this fear. And they would look forward to this adventure, but they'd have to be very still. So again, the problem here to solve was not technology. It was really about the user experience. And finally, this example on the right, this is called Frank from OCBC. OCBC is a major bank here in Singapore and across Southeast Asia. And it's kind of has the reputation of being, your grandma's bank, your granddad's bank. And typically it's older people. If you would go into a retail OCBC branch, it's like old people everywhere. You don't see any young people. So young people felt completely intimidated. So the bank was finding that they were not doing a good job of getting young people to come into their branches. What they realized was actually young people did not find it comfortable at all to go into a branch. They will just not go into a branch. Now, I know you're saying, AJ, young people do everything digitally. Yeah, but quite often you still, when you're initiating the relationship, sometimes you have to go in, you have to sign, there's some things you sometimes have to do in person. And their first problem statement that they set up was a failure. They said, how can we get young, like Gen Zs, to come into our bank and start a banking relationship with OCBC? And actually, they tried many things, but nothing worked. And then they changed the problem statement. They said, how can we create an optimal banking experience, initial banking experience for young people so that they will come and choose OCBC versus other banks? And what they came up with was kind of this experience center, which resembles much more like like a Apple store or like a Samsung experience store rather than an actual bank. So there's no hidden rooms off to the back. You don't have a whole bunch of old people sitting around. It was very, very friendly, and it didn't feel like a bank at all. So they created several of these centers around Singapore just to solve the initial problem. How do we get young people to start banking with OCBC? Now, once young people are banking, they're not going into Frank anymore because I'm on my app now. I'm using digital banking, but this is just for the first part of that experience. So these are just all examples from FMCG consumer goods to the medical industry and healthcare to financial services where design thinking has been used. Now, let's look a little bit more depth into the empathy stage. So it really starts off with understanding scope. And what I mean by this from a product management point of view, yes, you're going to need to understand your users and do the research. You also need to generate products. That's all going to come. But the first most important thing for product management is about strategic alignment. You want to make sure that you are aligned with senior leadership in your company, where to play, like which segments of customers are we focusing or not. What you don't want to do is try to focus on a group of users or customers that are not on the strategic agenda of your company. And guys, I've seen this happen before, where sometimes product managers, they get excited behind a group of users, but it's not really of interest to the company. And that just doesn't work. So make sure you are aligned with strategic marketing and the strategy of your organization and focus in that area. Now, when you focus in that area, we need to start off by kind of coming up with a hypothesis. Once we have a hypothesis, we need to say, well, we don't have all the evidence, but we feel this is the customers and this is the problem that they're having. Maybe it's anecdotal, maybe it's through our own experiences or people that we know, but we kind of have to have a feeling that there's something worth looking into. And then we have to say, well, what's the evidence that we would collect to validate if that's true or not? Once we're pretty certain, yeah, that hypothesis is actually pretty true. A lot of people said that they have that problem. A lot of our target users have said that they have that problem. Then we can start saying, all right, this is worth looking into. Let's better understand our users and develop a real persona. Once we develop the persona and really understand about their life, a day in their shoes, a day in their life, then we need to think about, well, what's a particular journey that we're going to focus on? Like, we can't just think about their whole life. Are we going to focus on a particular part of their life, a particular journey that's relevant to our organization? What does that journey look like? And let's understand the as is situation. And then from that journey, we're going to extract pain points and say, let's create problem statements from these pain points. So this is the kind of the overall flow that you go through. And problem statements is really the next one. It's in the define stage. But guys, remember this, because this is kind of how the flow looks like. Everyone says start with personas, but believe me, start with aligning with strategy first, and then the hypothesis, and then the persona customer journey map. Yeah. So what's the scope? Has the target market been defined by the organization? Has a target customer group been identified? You want to assess how much room is there for innovation. Is there a budget defined? You need to understand some of these things before we start the design thinking process. What has been decided that you need to be aware of? So what you want to find out in product management is sometimes you want to dig into those, your CMO or the head of insights, corporate planning and strategy. I would want to find out, hey guys, what have you guys decided? Let me know, what are the kind of guardrails for our innovation? How far can we go? You kind of want to have a feel for what that looks like ahead of time. And then we establish a hypothesis. So a hypothesis is just a gut feeling that there might be something worth looking into. I don't have a lot of evidence, but we all think that this is a problem. So here's an example. Maybe the OCBC Bank would say, we believe a large number of Gen Y feel disconnected with existing banks. But if we create a customized banking experience for this segment, we can successfully attract these customers. Okay, that's going to be your hypothesis. Oh, then I want to know, well, if that's your hypothesis, how will you prove that this is a true or a valid hypothesis or not? Well, here's an example. We might say, well, first of all, is there a large enough market? Are there a lot of these Gen Ys, right? And you might say, yes, we have strong evidence, and you can get some data points on that. The user is unhappy. Well, we're feeling that they feel disconnected with existing banks. Disconnected? Okay, how would you give me evidence that makes me feel, yes, a lot of Gen Y are disconnected? What's that evidence going to be, right? And then, they want a solution. Do they actually really want to do banking? Why do they want to do banking? What's driving them to want to what does banking mean for them? And do they really want a solution? So what we want to do is create a hypothesis first, but then we also want to say, okay, now if we all think this is the hypothesis, then we go to stage 2. All right, everyone in the room that agrees with this hypothesis, how will we prove if this hypothesis is valid or not? And then we want to have a discussion. Now, again, we don't want to make this an endless process. This is not like phase gate or stage gate, but we want to have at least a few things that we can validate. Because believe me, if you go to your bosses and say, hey, this is what we should do, this is the hypothesis, I've seen the biggest failure is people not passing the hypothesis. And people say, well, why do you think that's true? What evidence do you have to show me? And if you can't prove this, you do not go forward. So make sure you get this right. So then from there, we're like, yep, we validated, we've done the research, we've confirmed that these Gen Zs are not really, that they have this problem. Then we start to build up a persona. So here's an example. This is Shira. Here's a bit of a description of Shira and her life. Then we want to think about, well, what are the jobs that he or she is trying to achieve that we might be able to solve? What are her objectives? And I really like to include jobs to do. What are the jobs to do, the needs that she needs to have addressed? What are some use cases? Can you give me some examples of when she would be interacting with our product or service, either before she interacts or what would happen afterwards? You kind of want to understand her life a little bit. But ultimately, we also want to find out, well, what are her pain points and her pleasure points? What makes her happy in life? What is her attitude? What is her lifestyle? What are her behaviors? What are the pain points that she feels in her life and she wants to avoid? And this kind of gives us a flavor for this particular persona. And a persona is just a fictional representation of a group of people. So when we said to the bank, hey, these Gen Zs, Okay, Gen Z, well, what does that really mean? Well, let's introduce Shira. Shira is a representation, a fictional representation of this whole group. And through our research, we have met with many Shiras, and this is the information that we have to share. It creates a common understanding of the customer or the user. So let's watch a short video, because after we develop the persona, then we need to create a journey map for that customer. So let's watch this short video. Please take a few notes as you listen in.
How to create a journey map. It's always good to start with a pen and paper workshop. And if you can, include your customers or multiple departments in these workshops. If you'd like, we have workshop templates for journey maps on our website for free. So, here are the steps to follow when building out a basic journey map. First, choose a scope. Journey maps can have various scales and scopes, from a high-level map showing an end-to-end experience to a more detailed maps focusing on one step of a higher-level journey to very detailed step-by-step descriptions of micro-interactions. For an example, let's take the case of a mortgage loan. A journey map for a mortgage loan experience could show 30 years of that experience, including everything from searching to a house, signing contracts, living in the house, and making loan payments until the loan is paid off. Or another journey map can zoom in to just one of these steps to illustrate only the experience of searching and comparing mortgage loans. Another journey map could zoom in even further and illustrate a 1-hour consultation. First, decide how far you want to zoom in or out of an experience. The second step is choosing a persona. You have to choose a main actor for your journey. A journey map always focuses on the experiences of one main actor, such as a group of customers or employees. Some journey maps also combine various perspectives into one map. For example, comparing different customer groups or comparing customer experiences with those of employees. At any rate, to get started, choose a persona that you want to follow in the journey. Third, steps. A step is any experience the main actor has, such as an interaction with another person, a machine, or a digital interface. But steps can also be activities such as walking or waiting. The level of detail of each step depends on the overall scale of a journey map. As a little hint, to get started with steps, decide what is the crucial part of the experience, and then ask yourself what happens before this and what happens after. This will help you get going in building out each step. Fourth, lanes. You can add more lanes to your journey map to show or analyze different parts of the experience. For example, you can add a row of images below each step to show visually what is happening. This kind of lane with images is called a storyboard. Or you can expand on each step with more text descriptions. We call this a text lane. If you'd like to look at the emotional journey of an experience, you can add an emotional journey lane as well. Or if you want to start to create a list of ideas or jobs to be done for your organization, you could also do this with a text lane. Check out our cheat sheet on the different types of lanes you can add to a journey map.
Right. So those are the key, let's say, things to take away from doing a customer journey map. So again, it's thinking about the scope, like, do I want to look at the whole life of a customer over a mortgage process, or do I want to narrow in on just one part, which is like just the application part? You need to decide this within your groups, is where do we focus? Right? And where do we want to like kind of zoom in, or how far do we want to zoom out? The challenge is it's good to typically start pretty big and understand like a day in the life of our customer. But what we also then want to do is really go in and really focus on a particular area and be clear on creating a solution or a better experience for a particular journey. So before we go further, I'd like to ask if you guys have any questions so far on what we talked about. What we're going to get into next is the define stage. But do you have any questions about the empathy stage or when we would use design thinking? If you have any questions, put them into the chat, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Is scope on a particular pain point? Can you tell about it? So the scope should not be a particular pain point. It should be a particular activity that they're trying to do. So the scope would be like this, like the stage that you want to focus on. I'm going to give you an example, setting up a bank account. So that is the critical thing we want people to do, set up a bank account. We might want to think about, well, what's happening before they come to the bank? Do we want to start like the process just when they enter the bank? Or do we want to go a bit further and say, well, let's think about, how would a customer find out about which banks are available? How would they do the research? And then moving from awareness all the way through to making a decision to visit a bank and setting up an appointment. And then how far do we go after that? So they fill out paperwork. How far do we go? That determines kind of the scope of a journey. Now, along that journey, you're going to find many, many, many different pain points. And that's fine. You want to understand all of those. And this will inform how do we overcome these in developing a solution. So I hope that helps, Shubha, on that. Another question, can you share some examples where design thinking can be used as part of existing work in established organization? Yeah, absolutely. If you're getting some, if you're feeling that there's some problems with users in a particular area, let's say your company is having a lot of churn. There's a lot of people that are they're leaving the company. What we might want to do is try to understand that. Why are people leaving the company? How can we design a better process for an understanding of solutions to keep people in the company? Or maybe it's starting. If we want to have a great onboarding, what would be a great, incredible, onboarding process for a new staff member? What we could do is we could kind of understand, well, what are the key jobs that we need to do? What's the key emotions that they're having? How can we, being aware of all this, how can we pull it together in a very seamless flow? So here are just some examples of how it can be used in an established organization where they're doing something one way already today. And what we would do is say, okay, well, we're not going to tinker with that yet. Let's understand what would be an optimal way, and then we can start adapting from there. Yeah. The persona was built during initial product conception, and post it went live, and we ended up in design thinking. How is the persona building in this step different? Sorry, let me understand this again. The persona that was built during the initial product conception and post it went live, and we ended up in design thinking. How is sorry, Jyothi, can you unmute and maybe kind of speak out and ask your question so I understand it better?
Hi, AJ. So I just want to understand when we build a persona, right? When we try to come up with an enhancement of a product, or we build a product initially, we build up the persona thinking about the majority of who will be their prime consumers, prioritize it, and then go ahead. And for some reason, within a month or two, we end up saying that it is not working right. There is some issue, though we have that priority personas in place. Within 3-4 months, when we see there is a slag, something is not on the way that we thought, and we come up with the design thinking aspect, so I don't rebuild thing and I jump into the conclusion straight. So at this stage, how is that persona thinking different? Because I will still have the same personas, right? Because maybe my approach might differ, but should I rebuild the same persona approach? I mean, that is where I'm a little confused.
Right. So that's a good point. This is why we want to be iterative. We can start off with a feeling. So let's say we start off with a mandate. Your company says, hey, listen, you were working at the bank. We want you to understand how do we create an optimal banking experience for a particular, for young people. You might say, okay, well, young people, there's different types of young people. We might have several different personas that we kind of come up with, but during your research, you should really understand what are the different types of young people, and not just by demographics, but also by their attitudes and their behavior. There's some young people who want completely digital. Some want it to be a very personal touch the first time, right? So there could be different motivations behind people of the exact same age, sex, gender, culture, all that stuff. But behaviorally and attitudinally, they're very different. As you start experiencing and interacting with these bunch of different potential users, then you can start getting a feel for where do we want to focus. So you might generate actually 3-4 different personas, but then you have to say, well, which one do we believe is the one that we need to focus on? Which one is the most attractive one? Which one has the biggest pain points and is the one that we believe as a company we should focus on? And you want to start with that and focus on these people and then move forward. Now, as you start going along, if you start realizing, oh, well, actually, some of the pain points that we're identifying are not just unique to them, some of the other personas are having them, then you can expand it a little bit more, and that's fine. Or maybe you don't want to have some consolidation of personas and try to have a reclassification. You can do that as you go along. The point is you need to be a little bit iterative as you go along. So we don't want to say we've now done the persona and absolutely we can't adapt this. However, when we start to define and we start ideating, at that point, it's now too late. We're now stuck with this persona. We can't really go back and completely change it. We should have a high degree of confidence at that stage. We do have the right kind of segment. We do have the right customer we want to focus on. We really know their key problem, and then we want to move forward. If you don't have that certainty, then we don't want to move forward. It's not safe to do it yet. Great. So I'm going to okay, I hope that's really helpful. I gave a little bit more detail, but I hope that kind of strings together the story better. Personas differ as they are different actors, but how can we decide that this is the main actor? Well, it's going to be through the research stage when you're going through, and let's say you start off with that journey, that banking example, as I said, you'd want to find out and interview people, which ones are having the most difficulty with it. Who are the biggest detractors and what are their detraction points? And you want to start just understanding this by interviewing a whole bunch of different types of potential users. And as you go through that process, you'll start to get a feel for who's having the biggest pain points that we should really, really focus on. Yeah, that's what you want to do. Yeah. All right. Okay, great. So sorry, I'm going to just push on a little bit more into the define stage. So at this stage, define stage, we should really feel that, okay, we really are certain now that this is the persona that we want to focus on. This is the journey that has been kind of the base that we're focusing on. And we believe our persona has the most miserable experience through this journey. We believe that it's a large group, it's worth addressing. We believe that we can make money from it. And we want to beat our competitors in this space for these customers. Okay, now what's the real problem to solve? So what we want to do is try to extract problem statements from the customer journey. So whatever the journey is, we have these different stages and we have high points, we have low points. And in the high points, quite often, this is a good starting point for defining problem statements. We want to kind of articulate specific problem statements, or we can create a problem statement which covers and incorporates the whole thing. But what we want to do is extract problem statements. So what's a problem statement? How might we statements are the most common format. So how might we address a need or create a solution for our persona, and then critically so that we have a particular outcome? So how might we, so let me give you some examples here. How might we create a personalized customer onboarding experience for Michael, a persona, so that he will set up his first bank account with ABC Bank? Another one, how might we integrate a credit card application form in Instagram for Shira, our digital savvy young millennial, so that she will complete the entire application process? Right. So that's going to be another problem statement. So here are examples of problem statements that we could create, extracting these from our customer journey. So let's work on a simple case study together. Hopefully a lot of you use WhatsApp. I'm wondering, is WhatsApp something that you're all comfortable with? Well, let's imagine that Linda is our persona. Linda is is a regular WhatsApp user. She's trying to book dinner with her friends using a WhatsApp group chat. So Linda is in a group with her friends. They have a WhatsApp group. They're all friends together, and she wants to suggest a dinner. So let's say what are her key stages? She wants to propose dinner with her friends. Their friends are going to have to agree and say, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's choose a date. Let's choose a restaurant. Then she's going to be like, all right, cool. Let's see if I can make a reservation. She needs to contact the restaurant. She needs to get a confirmation. And then once we have the confirmation, everyone needs to book it into their calendar. And let's say that is the extent of this particular journey we focus on. This is the scope. And there are 4 stages that comprise the scope of this process. Then what we want to do is we want to think about, for example, what are the key actions or jobs to do that need to be done? What's the first thing that we need to do? Well, she needs to propose to friends that they get together for dinner. Her expectation is that her friends will be really excited. And what's her experience? Well, she puts it into the chat. Hey, girls, let's get together and have a dinner. All her girlfriends are super excited. So she's like, yeah, that's great. That's exactly what I wanted to have. That was my experience. But then she needs her friends to reply to confirm the interest. And she's hoping that everyone will really, respond promptly. This should take an hour and we should get, everyone to reply, but she's disappointed. Why? Some friends are not replying. Maybe they've seen the message, but it's just like they're too busy. They haven't answered. And so she gets a little bit disappointed. And then what we do again is we go through the rest of this journey and understand what are the key jobs to do. What is her experience? What's her expectation at that stage? What are some barriers and pain points that she can experience? And so we have some, moments where she's happy and some where she's frustrated. And we kind of understand what this journey looks like. And from here, we can create several problem statements. So we might say, for example, how might we create a group voting and scheduling function for a group so that we can simplify the process for group decisions in WhatsApp? So the solution would be a group voting and scheduling function. Another one could be, how might we include an auto notification option within a group or for a group so that contacts will be repeatedly reminded until they reply? So that could be another potential solution or part of the solution. Or how might we integrate a voting function for a group so that it simplifies decision-making? I would love to have that within a WhatsApp group chat. So here's some ideas of different problem statements we can extract from the user journey. So before we go further, are there any questions on kind of a user journey, what we're trying to do by creating a user journey? Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so we seem to be okay. If something comes up, I'll pause and we can come back and we can answer it. All right, we have one coming up now. Can we redefine the problem statements later? Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about this a little bit here now. I'll answer it right here. Let's make linkages. So in the define stage, what we do is we're going to be creating a lot of different problem statements, and we're going to go through a convergent process. So we're going to have a lot of problem statements. And then what we have to do is we sometimes say, well, actually, we have, 2 different sides to the same problem. So we can consolidate this together and refine a bigger problem statement. Or maybe we're going to link multiple ones together. And we then start to go through a process of really deciding what is the problem that's worth solving. Yeah. We need to go through this process where we need to have a lot of different problem statements by really understanding. Some of these problem statements are very, very technical and we need to park them. We'll come back to it. But what we need to do fundamentally is distill down to a core problem statement, which is large enough and worthy enough to solve. And how do we know that it's the right problem statement? Honestly, guys, I want to ask some of users. I want to put 3 problem statements in front of my users and say, guys, if we can only solve one of these problems, where should we spend our time to solve it for you? And then they would say, well, yes, these are my problems, but I think the first one, that's really the one. And then you've asked a lot of your users and find out which ones do they believe is worth solving. That's a good way to do it. Now, that's from a very user-centric point of view. From a company point of view, you kind of do need to sniff out, is there money in solving this? You don't want all your product development to be like a cost center, right? You want to say, well, if I solve that problem, what would be the economic benefit or gain? So for example, if it's the application process and we say, well, actually the barrier to getting new people to join our company or use our product is the application process. Yeah, hell yeah, that's a very big problem to solve, right? It's definitely worth solving that problem. So you just need to sniff out, is this worth really solving? Is there potentially money there? So we go through a convergent process. And what we do is we say, let's create a lot of ideas, but we're going to have to narrow down to the one that we want to really focus on. Here's asking a question. Is there any specific flow for the user journey, or can it differ person to person or according to any other demographic criteria? Well, yes, there are going to be some slight variations for different types of people and their preferences, but generally we want to keep it like in the middle, in the mass. It's like a bell curve. Focus on the 80%, except that there's going to be 10% outliers on either side. And we say, yes, they exist, but what we have found is that the vast majority of people are having this kind of an experience, or this is what their journey kind of looks like. Literally, guys, you'll never be 100%. Kind of focus on the 80%. Now, if you're in a situation where you're like, ooh, it looks like it's not an 80%. It looks like there's a 50 and a 50. Hey, you got two different kind of segments there. You might need to have two different journeys and slight variation where that same journey might be like 80 or 90% the same, but there's going to be that differentiation. Is that worth looking into? Well, if 50% of people like A and 50% like B, I'd say, yeah, we definitely need to have two different variations along this journey. I hope that helps. But what we do then is we distill down in this define stage to a key problem statement, which really will guide the team on the ideation process. And in the ideation process, this is a very divergent process. We want to create a lot of different ideas, and then we're going to narrow down again. Not all the ideas are great, but we want to start off with a lot. So what we do is we create a lot of different ideas. And then what we need to do is, some of the ideas aren't great, but some of them are really, really like golden nuggets. And what we want to do is try to find out what are these golden nuggets and use those as a starting point for building concepts by putting some of these golden nuggets together and say, oh, now we start to get a concept that feels like the start of a solution for our user. So how do we get these ideas? Well, typically we do brainstorming. And if you want a detailed process, look into affinity mapping, which will detail how do you do a proper brainstorming process. But what are some tips for effective brainstorming that you can share? So if you can just use the chat, everyone. I'm sure a lot of you have been in brainstorming sessions before. What are some things that you can come up with? Some ideas? $635, fantastic, excellent. 6 thinking hats, great. The 6 thinking hats, I'll defer that because that's great, but that's going to be coming a little bit later. But I like the 6 thinking hats. Yes, the 5 whys, interesting. Yeah, great. So these are all different variations that we can bring into it. Couple of key things just to mention, summarizing here, having a facilitator to guide the brainstorming. We quite often use Post-it notes and don't have a lot of talking in the beginning. And the reason why, guys, is because when we go through the brainstorming process, we want to be creative, but we also need to make some judgments on like, well, what is really a golden nugget? What's really kind of usable from this brainstorming, right? But it's really hard to be creative and judgmental at the same time. So let's just accept that we need to do both, but to do both at the same time, it doesn't really work well. So let's cut it in the middle. Let's say when we're going to be creative, let's just be completely creative, and then we'll be judgmental later and we'll see which ones are the golden nuggets. But let's put these into 2 different steps. So in the beginning, we really want to focus on quantity over quality. Guys, quality is important. We'll get to quality, but let's just start off with getting lots of ideas first. We want to withhold the criticism. We want to welcome crazy ideas, and we want to build on other people's ideas. So here's some ideas, some examples. We do a Post-it note session. We get a lot of ideas, and I might say from a wall of 100 different ideas, I like this A, B, and C kind of Post-its. I would kind of pull them aside and say, these are the ones I want to play with first. And these kind of ideas, think of these Post-it notes as a whole bunch of Lego pieces. So if you want to be able to ultimately create some kind of a concepts, well, you have to have enough material to play with. So that's why you want to have quantity. You want to have a lot of different pieces of Lego, like, that you could put together, and then you can start coming up with interesting concepts. And another thing is not only quantity, but what we want to have some out of the box ideas. If your box of Lego is all the same, just bricks, different color bricks, come on, you're going to have a pretty boring concept that's not going to really excite and thrill your user. And that's why sometimes we want those crazy ideas. We want someone to have a propeller or a steering wheel or, some hinge, like, these different, funky pieces of Lego. And if we put some of those into the pile, then we have a lot more things we could play around with, which will be really interesting to the user. So this is why we don't want to be, criticizing too much. If we criticize too much, we get a whole bunch of the same old bricks with different colors. It's not really exciting. So withhold criticism for later. Criticism can come later when we have concepts, but let's not criticize the base ideas, which are like the raw materials for building concepts. So typically we go through several rounds of brainstorming. And this is where I think was mentioned the 6 thinking hats. We can have different rounds using thinking hats as well. So imagine we're wearing, our black hat. Why is this a terrible idea? Or we can wear, the yellow hat. Why is this a great idea? Why would users love this idea? What would they come up with? And then we come up with a lot of ideas, a ton of Post-it notes. And then from there, we kind of want to cluster and put them into certain buckets. Like some ideas are relating to technology, some are relating to the process, some are relating to marketing issues, so on and so forth. We kind of want to cluster them together. And then we can go through a process of trying to find the golden nuggets. Like which ones do we start to feel have the most potential as a starting point? Now, guys, we're not throwing anything away, but we're kind of trying to find out what's the starting point for creating concept. Well, let's take the golden nuggets first and see if we can build something from those. So how do we select the golden nuggets? One way you can do this is everyone gets a dot. If you're physically in a room together, you could say everyone, you have like a sticky note, a sticky dot, and you get 5 of them. So everyone, you get 5. Go to the wall and just, put those 5 sticky dots on the ideas that you feel have the most potential as a starting point. Which are the ones that you really like? Sometimes what I'll do is say, well, the red dots are just your base idea. Here's 5 blue dots. These are for the crazy ideas. Go put this on the crazy ideas that you think are the most interesting to start off with as well. So those are ways that we can try to, let's say, identify the golden nuggets on your wall of ideas. And then from there, again, what we would do is we would say, well, why don't everyone kind of go take the Post-its that you like or copy them maybe, and then bring it aside and then start to, put them down on a piece of paper and then start to build your concept. Write some notes, maybe sketch out what this would look like and start to build up some kind of a concept. And then you can create some kind of a concept, which is, let's give a name to this concept. I'm going to call it like the OCBC Frank, for example. What's the slogan? Imagine Apple was managing the application process for Gen Z, something. What's the problem that we're solving? Well, we're trying to get Gen Zs are not coming to retail branches. How can we create a physical experience for their initial onboarding as a banking customer? Describe the solution. Okay, this is what the environment looks like. This is why our users would love this place. And what would be the benefits if we do this? Yeah, well, more of these people will be attracted to us than going to the other banks. So here's an example of a concept template. You can create this. I've seen many different variations of this, and it also depends. Is it a product? Is it a service? Is it a solution? You might need to adapt this, but create some kind of a concept template, which people can work on together to create concepts from. So I'm going to give you another example, Sandeep's Fast Cash. This is my concept. The slogan is for SME loans, and they're approved in 60 seconds, and funds are distributed to these SME owners within 3 days. Wouldn't that be great if you're a small business owner? So what's the problem? Why would we want to have Sandeep's Fast Cash? Well, the problem is, how might we offer easy, fast, frictionless online loan applications with short decision time for SMEs in order to increase loan disbursements? So describe the solution. Well, this would be an app-based solution. It would be using cash flow AI. So we can analyze Sandeep's kind of cash flow, and we can then rapidly assess risk and make a loan decision. And then if we can do that very quickly using AI, we can disperse the cash. What are the benefits of doing this? Well, for Sandeep, he'd have a faster approval and distribution of loans than any other bank. and we can leverage our existing information and data, and we can add on to it. So here's just an example of one concept. And then we have another concept. So that's kind of the process, guys, that we go through, going through the ideation stage and then starting to build up concepts along the way. Are there any kind of questions that you're coming up with so far? All right. Okay. Red dots that you mentioned, are they like prioritizing and then pushing them forward? Yes. So Shubha, they are trying to identify out of a wall of a lot of different Post-it notes, where do people seem to feel is a good starting point? And what you'll see actually in a room is that if you had, let's say 8 people that had dots, they all had 5 dots, you're going to see where they're starting to gravitate to and which ideas you think is a good starting, do they feel is a good starting point. So you start to kind of identify through, let's say, almost like democracy, kind of where do people feel are the best ideas to start off with. Now, then we take those and we start building concepts based on these first initial ideas. But what happens is then a good facilitator for this process, actually, I've run many of these types of workshops. And typically what I would do if I'm facilitating is I would let these people take these ideas and start building up concepts. But I would say, one, if someone takes a Post-it off the wall, I don't want them to do that. I'd say, write it down on a piece of paper. What's the idea? So other people might have that same idea that they want to use with other golden nuggets, and they can build up their own concept. So it's not your idea, just note down which are the ones that you find is most attractive. So the dots just visually gives people, some golden nuggets to focus on initially. Now, again, that doesn't mean that we can't come back to these later as well. So what will happen is when people start working on these concepts aside at their tables, start building up and linking them together, building up an idea, start sketching it out a bit. Sometimes I might go and say, okay, well, guys, imagine like we're 20 minutes in. I say, guys, imagine your customers like your idea. The users would like your idea, but they're not going to be thrilled by your idea. They just think it's okay. It's all right. Imagine they're just not going to be thrilled. I want you guys all to go back to the board. And now I want you to maybe focus on the blue dots, the crazy ideas. Imagine that there's some of those blue dots that the customers would really, really love, and try to see if you can bring over any of those ideas to bring that novelty factor to your concept. What would that look like? Then they can look and say, well, actually, let me start trying to bring this into it. I think that might have some potential. And that could be a way that you can spur creativity as well. A second question here, we will define the technical issues and other issues they would have, and then we can conceptualize it, right? Yes, absolutely. What often quite ends up happening is that customers or users are not good at articulating what they want or what the solution would be. They know what the pain point is. They know what the problem is. And sometimes they can't even articulate that really well. They need help. People need help with that. It's like the old people saying, oh, I want mobility. I want mobility. They don't really want mobility. They don't want to feel lonely. They want to feel connected. They just didn't articulate it as clearly as we would like. But through our observation, we are able to do that. So we need to be very patient in this process. But quite often, what we want to focus on from a user's perspective is, you know what, don't tell me about the solution. I'm an engineer. We have engineers. We'll figure that out. Just let me really understand what is the problem that you're facing. What emotion do you have? And what would be a great outcome? If we solve it, magically, what would be the outcome? So what? How's life any better for you? And when they just talk kind of on that high level, then you're like, all right, I got it. I kind of understand what's the problem and why you want to solve that problem. Let us work on it. We are the experts in this space. We'll figure this out. And then we'll come back to you with several different options. And then we're going to kind of get you to go through it, and we'll see which one seems to work best. That's kind of the process that we would go through. Yeah. All right. Smith has a question here. User journey maps also help us to highlight the real problems users are facing in our products to the management and external teams. Absolutely. So you don't have to just try to use design thinking. And I think this goes back also to another question. You don't have to use design thinking just for unmet needs or like, new customer segments that you want to focus on. You can look at existing users using your existing products and services and map it out and find out, what does this look like? There are always going to be opportunities to improve, right? I mean, this is what's happening with technology quite a lot as well. There's so many variations because we're always learning new problems all the time. Not all of these technical problems in technology come from user journeys, but a lot of them do. And what we want to do is just by continually understanding and optimizing that journey and competing with competitors on that, that is going to be the way that we're hopefully going to beat our competitors, right? All right. All right, fantastic. So yes, we do want to be using it as product managers. If you're going in, guys, if you're going to be doing new product development, of course, we start carte blanche, completely open space. But in a completely new product development, we have to really align with the strategic direction of the company. And we need to be able to align with that and then say, that seems to be the landing zone. That's the area of the moon that our company wants to land on. And they're asking me to work with our insights team to figure out who are the customers and what will the solution look like. And I need to, as a product manager, to kind of go through that process. Great. Sometimes they're like, hey man, we have products in this part of the moon, but there's also other competitors there. What we want you to do, product manager, is you're responsible for these group of products or a particular product. We want you to really understand, what does value look like to our users? What are their pain points? And you would want to build up those personas and say, well, company, I don't know if you know this, but we have 3 different types of key buyers. And let's look at what those personas look like. And then these are what their journey looks like. So even if it's the same product, even if it's the exact same process, we might have one segment which the journey that we have today is perfect for them. They love it. Do not change that process because they love it. However, for another group of customers doing that exact same process, they absolutely hate the beginning part. The beginning part sucks. The second part is okay and they love it. So we want to stick with that second part. It's good. But that first part for segment B, we got to create a new experience. And if we don't do that, marketing is not going to solve this problem. We need to fundamentally adapt the solution or the experience or the journey to make it relevant for B. Because what's B doing? They're having that pain point. They're going to another competitor and another competitor is doing that part better than we are. So this is how we would want to do it as a product, doing product management for existing products and services. Right. And the great thing as well, guys, is what's very important is, to be honest, is storytelling is as a product manager, there's going to be a lot of detail behind and lots of data. But it's hard to win over, let's say, other stakeholders that you need to win over when you want to get budgets, when you want to get approval and support. And so storytelling becomes very important. If you can tell a story from your user's life and their experience, it makes it so much more real. Yeah, it's rather than facts and figures and Excel sheets and blah, 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 tell a story about your user, or maybe even create a video of your user interacting and going through that process, and then let other people and say, well, I'm not going to tell you what are the problems. What do you see as the problems watching this video? Sometimes that can be very, very impactful. All right, let me go on to the next stage, and then we'll have a lot more time for Q&A as well. The testing and prototyping stages. So remember, we talked about, we have the prototype stage, we have the testing stage, but it's very, very iterative. So let's say at this stage, we have some concepts that we've built up at the ideation stage. A concept is just what comes out of the ideation stage. There should be several concepts to solve this pain point that we defined here. So we might have, let's say we have let's make it easy. We have 3 concepts. We have concept A, we have concept B, and concept C. Okay, great. Well, we need to make a prototype of concepts A, B, and C. And then we need to use those prototypes to go back to our users. Now, they could be the same users or they could be different, but it's got to be, they need to be qualified that they are the same group of users. And then what we want to do is we want to either go back to them or find new ones and really start to go through and saying, hey, This is what we believe it was the problem. Is that right? Yes, that's the problem. Please solve that for us. All right, we have 3 different solutions here. Let's get you to use them. Let's kind of get them to experience the idea, the solution, the prototype, and let's see what happens. What will we learn by them interacting with it? Sorry, MVP. Yes, MVP is well, actually, no. I mean, there's 2 ways of looking at it. The way that I look at it is an MVP will be something that we, there's initial prototypes that we put together, but in the beginning, some of the prototypes are so basic, but MVPs will be when we get much more high fidelity. So let's say it's an advanced prototype. I'll explain this a little bit more, Nakul, in just a moment here. So let's talk about the journey through prototypes. So as I mentioned, typically this is a Post-it notes, guys. We normally start off with Post-it notes, either virtually using Miro or Mural. So you guys know Miro or Mural. I'm just going to put a Miro or Mural. These are kind of on virtual canvases, which are used quite a lot. And during COVID, this has been exploding, but this is a great way to do virtual whiteboard canvassing where you can have a lot of sticky notes going onto a board. You can copy and paste and cluster. So in real life, we typically use a whiteboard or a big wall to come up with lots of ideas. We pull some of these ideas together. We build kind of a rough idea of a concept. And the concepts are not easy to share with users. So this is why we build some kind of a prototype. And in this picture here, the example we're showing of a prototype is a user journey. So let's say this is going to be the onboarding process for a new customer. So they go from awareness to searching the internet to making a decision on where they're going to want to go. They make an appointment, blah, 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 blah. We kind of make this storyboard and then we bring it to our users and say, all right, users, remember, so you are this kind of a person. So we're speaking to the right group. Yeah. I'm a digital native, a digital first millennial. Yeah, that's me. Do you have this problem? Yeah. I have that problem. I think OCBC sucks. I don't want to bank with you guys. I hate going to your branches. All right, cool. Well, imagine you had this was your experience. Here is this new kind of a process or a flow. This is the story. Imagine this was your story. Tell me, what do you think? And then they kind of go through it and then they'll tell you, oh, that's pretty cool. I like that. Or no. This third step, there's no way that I would ever do that. That doesn't make sense to me. All right, cool. What does make sense to you? How would this story go? Why don't you tell me an optimal story? And that's so the prototype just serves as a basis to give your idea and get feedback on it. So a prototype is just an early sample, a model or release of the product to test concepts or processes. Yeah, that's the official term, the definition of it. But we go from low fidelity to high fidelity. So Nakul, going back to you. So over here on the right, this is a kind of a high fidelity prototype. At this point over here, I really feel that we've gone through, let's say 10 different prototypes, but we're now starting to narrow down to the one that really seems to be, that has all the best parts of the first 10. And we kind of crammed it and consolidated it together. And now we're starting to build our MVP. So this is where I say it's kind of an advanced version of prototypes. Is some of your prototypes you should be almost embarrassed to show your users. It's so basic, but you just test out the basic idea, right? So for example, here, if you're going to be doing this as a sketch, you wouldn't want to be hiring a sketch artist to do some beautiful, elaborate pictures of what this looks like. It will take too long and it's going to cost too much money. And it's so early, it's so basic. Use stick figures, make it look almost childish. That's fine. Get them to, you know what I mean? But then once you start getting a lot of people telling you, yeah, that story works, that's really, really awesome, then you can start going through and building something high fidelity. And in a high fidelity prototype or concept, what we'll do is we'll say, now we're going to start looking at, hey, do our customers seem to like blue? Or do we have to actually make it red? Or do we want orange? We could talk about colors. We could talk about design elements, right? We could talk about pictures. Do they like this picture? We can A/B test a lot of this stuff. Do you like this picture or this picture? Do you like this color or this color? And we can go through all of the detailed design type of stuff as we get more high fidelity. But in the basic stages, we'd have to be okay, well, if we're going to have like, the front page of a particular app, what would we want to see on it? And you might have 5 different versions of this, and some might be like, oh, what we're hearing from people is that they want it to be very, very visual. They like to have these pictures. They want to have our logo somewhere in there. They want to have buttons. They don't want to have drop-down boxes. They don't want to scroll. They don't want a carousel. They seem to want these things. All right, cool. Then once we start telling us, a lot of people say, yep, we don't want the carousel, we want buttons. All right, cool. So now we have an idea of a button, but even at this stage is so basic because we don't want to give them these colors, like a high fidelity at this point, because they might be then focusing on things that we don't want them to focus on. Where we're just like, we just want to assess if you want a button or a carousel. We don't want them to don't worry about the color. So don't give them the color. Don't confuse them. Don't give them too many things to judge on. Try to be clear on when we make a prototype, what are we really going to test? Let's not go overboard and try to fall in love with it and start putting too many bells and whistles at this stage, because it's going to confuse your user. Don't think about from your perspective. Think about, how can I make this as easy and as consistent as possible to get the feedback that I want at this stage? What is the purpose of this prototype? What information do I really want to get? And then once you're really clear on that, and in product management, you have to be very clear on what that is, because you might have other people putting the sketches together and say, hey guys, listen, if we have different kind of teams that are working on different concepts, you want to say, guys, we've gone through the first testing, and out of the 10 first ideas, 5 of them failed, and we're left with 5. For the next round of testing, this is what we want to know. And then they have clarity to what they want to do, but also sometimes tell them what not to do. Don't put in colors, don't put in different fonts, like it can be distracting. So that's just this is why we want to go bit by bit and create higher fidelity as we start to get confidence that we're doing the right things, that people are telling us, yes, that's right, that's right, that's right. Then we can start saying, okay, great, we're getting that right. We know we need to have a button. The question is, what shape should it be? What font, what color? That's going to be an advanced stage. Yeah. So sorry, I got a question here. Do you think A/B testing will cost us more than just taking user experience survey? First of all, I think the user experience survey is really, really helpful in understanding the user journey, the as-is situation, to try to find out what's the problem along a journey. I think A/B testing is really specifically for the testing of prototypes, and I think it's much more helpful here, because then people can see it. Like, you got to show them, well, here's the A, here's the B, and let them make a decision. The other thing is that sometimes people say things on surveys, but they don't, then you do an A/B test and the answers will be quite different. So sometimes you got to put it in front of people and let them see it and then make a decision. And sometimes that's a better way to do it. So I'm more, to be very clear, I like user experience surveys, but I usually want to have that for when they're telling me what's the existing process or existing journey that they're going through, to really understand it. I like to use it much better for that. I like to use A/B testing much more when it comes to going through prototypes, like little bits. And now when we have an MVP, then it might come back again, where you say, okay, well, listen, we have 1 or 2 or 3 different MVPs that, from 30 different ideas. Now maybe we can get them to do a user experience survey. But another way to do a user experience survey is, so I talked about this, guys, was just kind of getting higher fidelity as we go along. But what I want to talk about is a user feedback capture grid. So I'm going to put this in here. User feedback capture grid. So I put that out to everyone, and I think, and I hope that you'll learn more about this when you talk about the user testing. Like, that's an upcoming module for you guys. But what we want to do is that when you have a user experience survey, when you have a survey in general is quite fixed. You got to make sure you're asking the right question. You don't want to be biased and ask it the wrong way, and then it's like, do you think this idea is good or is it great? Like, sometimes we can be biased with things. Or, if we gave you a button, which button would you like? Well, you're assuming that people would want a button. So what happens is when you do like just a user feedback capture grid, you're much more open to just seeing what do people like, what they don't like. And you're very free flow with it. You're like, I'm open, I'm listening, I'm observing you, and I'm going to take notes as we go through this process. And you sometimes get insights from your user that you wouldn't have even thought about asking. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. Now that I see that these users are using it, yeah, I wouldn't have even captured that as a question on my user survey. So I really like using this user feedback. Yeah, Eddie, using a 2x2. So we can ask things like, you know, what questions do our users ask about things? What suggestions do they have to improve? You know, what do they like about our idea that we want to keep? What are things that they really don't like? So you can have certain different areas and quadrants, and you can just, as they're interacting with your prototype, you're just really, really open to the feedback by watching them and just kind of seeing what happens. So that's a very natural way of doing and getting feedback from users to see what they like and what they don't like. And you can ask them questions along the way. But if you ask a user like a survey, sometimes we miss out the right questions to ask. That's the problem with surveys. All right. Now, of course, what you want to do, though, is as you're doing many, many different tests with users, you do need to have a systematic way of capturing the insights and making actions, right? You want to make quantifiable decisions. So that's going to be something which you need to do as well, is to document those insights that you get. Right. So I have just talked to you guys a lot about this stuff. What I want to do is we're going to have a little bit of time to go into Q&A and talk about these things. And we can go back into some of the slides as well if you would like to ask any questions about those. But I want to share with you some suggested readings. One, must read, guys, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Have any of you already read this book? Please give me just a yes if you know about this or if you have read this book before. Jad Paul, you know it. Eric Ries, yes. Eddie, you own it. Karen, you know it. Fantastic. So a great book that really talks about a lean, agile way to kind of exploring potential opportunities and creating concepts and going through. Yeah. So that's one. Another one is, this is really about methodology, is the Design Thinking Playbook. So you can try to find this. This is a great book, the Design Thinking Playbook. I use this one. I have it here somewhere. Very, very good book that I would really highly recommend. And then the other version is really about the tools and the frameworks, is the Design Thinking Toolbox. So again, these are two great books, which I can really, really highly recommend that you guys get if you're going to be doing product management and going through design thinking. These are must-have resources, I think. So sorry, another question that was asked. How many individuals to reach out for feedback on a prototype? Should they be from the target audience? Let me answer the second one. Yes, it should be from your target audience. Yes. How many? You know what? It really depends. You're going to get into a lot more details on this when you are going through the next modules. But from my experience, it really, first of all, it really depends on, the first thing is it a B2C market or is it a B2B market? That's going to really determine kind of, what's an appropriate sample size to go through. The other thing is that I kind of feel is I start off with 10. Just like, I usually just start off with 10. If 10 out of 10 people are telling me the same thing, I'm going to assume that the 11th person is going to say the same thing and the 12th person is going to say the same thing. So typically I'll start off with 10. And then if I'm starting to, then I'll keep on going. I'll add another 10, I'll add another 10. But if I start seeing that there's a consistency to answers, there's going to be a point where I'm like, is it A or B or A or B? And there's like, here's A, B, back and forth. Okay, now then it's like A, then a B, A, B, 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 A. And it's kind of going this way. Then I start adapting my prototype. And then I start hearing, oh, it's A. There's going to be a certain point where I'm like, it doesn't help if I test with more people. The answer is probably still going to be A, Yeah. A/B testing won't work when we're launching the product for the first time. Well, A/B testing is going to be used a ton of times when you're going through that prototyping, yeah? when it like it's just, you should be doing so many like different A/B tests on not only the product, but even in terms of the marketing when you launch. Like we can use A/B testing for marketing as well, and messaging and so on and so forth. So you'll be using that methodology of testing a lot before you make a decision to launch. So it won't work when we are launching the product. It will work for the marketing part. So the A/B testing in the beginning will be about the product and solution. Does that work? Does the solution really work? Does this make sense? Do users love it? Yeah. We're confident that it's going to be A, it's not going to be B. All right, cool. We now have a product which we've tested and validated that people like this a lot more. Some people like B, but that's not what we're deciding to launch. We're going to launch the A version. All right, great. So now with the decision to make is there, but now we need to start launching it and think about the launch plan, the product launch plan. And when we do that, there's going to be another process where we have to really say, okay, guys, remember we had this customer journey that we had. We've now kind of created an optimal journey because we've storyboarded this, for example, and now we know what this optimal journey looks like. But now we have the product kind of sorted out quite well. Now we need to focus on the marketing elements of it, the communication and the launch and reaching our customers. And that's where we're going to need to A/B test as well. A/B test messaging, A/B test platforms, all kinds of stuff. I hope that helps. All right, fantastic, guys. So listen, let's keep it going on. We have a little bit more time. I actually got through this a little bit faster than I expected. So I want to see, is there anything you guys would want me to go back on? What questions do you have? Just keep in mind, like I said in the beginning, you're going to be doing a whole kind of module on the testing part. So that's going to be going into a lot more depth with the in that stage as well. But do you have any other questions about design thinking that you'd like to ask? What I'll do is I'm going to just come back to this and just kind of just keep the overall framework here and just ask if you guys have any questions at this part. Yes, we will definitely share the deck with you. You will get that. Okay, so let me add on maybe a few other tips that I think that I can give a little bit more advanced knowledge. When it comes to the empathy stage, here's a big problem is what kind of insights do we get? I'm gonna just go back to this because guys, it's the beginning part, you need to get that right, because if you don't get it right, everything else just isn't really valuable. So I want to go back here to, all right, so developing this persona. One thing that we want to stay away from as much as possible is not just focus on like demographic information, such as like gender and, cultural things. Let's say age, like for example, age, income levels. We don't want to focus just on these things. And the reason why is because we don't want to assume, oh, well, if it's a woman, the woman's going to love pink. We have a lot of biases. Oh, they're young people, so they don't have money, or they're risk takers. They're not conservative. We can have a lot of biases based on demographic information. And what we want to do rather is we want to find out, how can we look at a market of people that we don't look at their age, at their sex, at their income levels, but we try to understand a market based on their value drivers. Like, what's their attitude? What's their behavior? So if we're saying, well, there's a group of people out there that want to do digital banking, for example, but they're really, really risk averse. And so how do we address those people? When we say risk averse, it could be a young person, it could be middle age, it could be old, it could be man and woman. It could be, these people exist in all pretty much age and demographic buckets: rich people, old people, rich people, poor people. The propensity to be conservative and risk averse isn't only based on age. I mean, we could say that older people will be less risk averse, yes, but to say that, you know, young people aren't in that have that same kind of behavior is completely wrong. So what we want to do when we build these personas is try to think about attitudinal statements. And what we could do to find out, you know, our users is to say, here's some statements on life. What's your outlook on life? Is it, you know, I'm open and I like to take risks, or, you know, I tend to not take risks, or whatever. We want to try to find out what are the attitudes and behaviors of our people, because that's really, really important to understand how to create solutions for them. Now, you might want to think, well, can we go back to the company and see what insights that we have? A lot of companies have a lot of data points. And the problem that I found is, yes, pragmatically, you want to do that. You want to see, well, what information do we already have that I can leverage to guide us to where we should focus and who we should focus on. The problem that I've seen in a lot of organizations is a lot of that information is actually demographic information. So they're not going to tell us what are the behaviors and attitudes of people, because companies typically aren't good at collecting that information. So sometimes it's not an easy start point to really analyze that data. That doesn't really inform, you know, what value looks like to our users and what we should do. What it does help is it helps trying to find people. Demographic information is very, very good for marketers, digital marketers, to say, you want to find Shiras, and these are women between, you know, 23 and 28, and they're women. I'll know where to find them. It's great to finding people, but we don't know what value looks like to them. So we don't know if they're conservative or risk takers or digital savvy or not. We just know where to find them. So that's the problem with demographic information. So when you come up with these personas, don't load it with only demographic information. And the challenge will be, in an organization, a lot of companies run on demographic information. So that's how they think, that's how they operate. And now when you come up with a persona, they're going to be wanting to put people into demographic buckets, because that's what most people have always done. And so if you're doing product management, you have to be like, listen, guys, I know that's going to be important for your digital marketing and reaching these people later, but that demographic information does not inform what I should be building and what would be a great, you know, journey. We can't just base it on women between 23 and 28 would love this journey. That's not a representation of life, right? That's not the bucket. That's not the way we should classify a market, right? I understand that people do it, companies do it to reach these people, but from a product management perspective and a product development perspective, it's not really helpful. So try to stay away from that when it comes to the persona, or, you know, address it a little bit, but don't focus too much on it. Sorry, so I'm going to go back to some of the questions that are here. Tejas, can you please share any B2C product with regards to the 5-stage process? Okay, well, I mean, we could go back to the examples that I had back here. So, well, I mean, these are all B2C kind of examples, right? Consumer goods to medical devices to a banking product for retail banking. So Tejas, I want to make sure I answer your question though. So you want to unmute and just kind of ask it out? And by the way, I think we need to do a survey. So the survey, we have the last 3 minutes or so. So Anirudh, please do share the survey so everyone can start writing it.
Sure.
But Tejas, did you want to unmute and kind of ask your question? While that's happening, we can also, I can answer while you guys are putting, you know, answering this survey.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, man. Thanks, man. So I was just, my question was that regarding this 5-stage process, if you come across any B2C product, right, that you have started from the empathy and then the define, then the ideate and the prototype, if you can share that, would be really helpful.
Right. So, I mean, these are products here though, right? All of these that I showed you, these were earlier examples. These were all B2C examples. If I can give you another one, I launched a product in China, which was an app. So I worked with the Economist Group, the international newspaper or magazine. And they're really, like, their audience are globally curious people. people that are curious about the world around them. So if they're going to watch the news, they're not just interested in local news, but they also want to know about the world, what's going on, how is the world shaping. And so the people who read The Economist are globally curious people. And people who's globally curious, it's not a demographic group. It could be anyone. It could be young people, it could be old people that are curious about the world. So what we did is we were creating a product for China. So it was going to be a Chinese language product, the first non-English kind of media product or a news product from the Economist Group. So we developed, and we had to go through this process of we worked with research agencies like Ipsos that helped us to do a lot of user research and finding how do we find globally curious people? Where do they spend their time now? What are the problems? What are they looking forward to? What are their unmet needs in what's being offered to them today? And so we went through that process of trying to really understand who our users were, where do they spend their time, what were their attitudes, how do we reach them? And we started then forming like, okay, well, what from our content do we have? Can we pull together into a product for them? And then we kind of went through the stages of developing an app, a subscription-based app, and then we launched it in the market. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that was great. Could you please share the name of that app, AJ?
Yeah, it's called Global Business Review. GBR, Global Business Review. But mind you, just to share with you, it's in Chinese. So I don't know if your Chinese good if you want to use it, but yeah. All right, great. But sorry, Barath has your hand up. You want to ask a question? All right, guys, I think, sorry, I can't hear. I think we're kind of getting to the end here. I just want to say, guys, I hope that this was really helpful for you and it gives you a good flavor for the overall process of design thinking. We went through a couple of examples here and it's a starting point. You're going to dig deeper into some aspects of this, but today it should give you a good feeling of kind of how do we approach design thinking? What are situations and do we use this? And what does that process and flow look like? When it comes to the prototyping, the MVP, the user testing, you're going to have a lot more questions on that, and it makes sense. And again, we have dedicated sessions that you're going to jump into that. So guys, I hope that was really helpful for you today. I really enjoyed taking you through this. Thanks for all the questions. And guys, whenever you see me next time, I hope other people, you can also feel free and comfortable to ask questions. I'll try my best to answer. All right, guys. Have an awesome day ahead. I really enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.
Oh, thank you so much, AJ, for the session.
All right. My pleasure.
Thank you.